Attention American poker players! Do you want to legally cash out your poker winnings to PayPal? Then head to globalpoker.com and see why it's the fastest growing site for US players. That's globalpoker.com. Have you heard about America's Card Room? Already the most trusted US online poker site since 2001, America's Card Room deals out more than 246,000 hands of real money poker every day. And right now, Poker Stories listeners can get in on a great deal. Just head over to americascardroom.eu and sign up using the promo code CPPodcast. New players will get a 100% deposit bonus up to $1,000, 20 days of free jackpot poker, and 4 entries into the $250 new depositor free roll. Don't wait, you can be playing poker online right now. Head to americascardroom.eu today and don't forget to use the promo code CPPodcast for your bonus.
Poker Stories is an audio series that features casual interviews with some of the game's best players and personalities. Each episode highlights a well-known figure in the poker world and dives deep into their favorite tales both on and off the feld.
Welcome back to another edition of Poker Stories, brought to you by Card Player, the Poker Authority, and hosted by me, Julio Rodriguez. Today on the podcast, we have 3-time bracelet winner and 2010 World Series of Poker Player of the Year, Frank Kassela. Now, Frank isn't like our typical interviews because he doesn't consider himself to be a professional poker player. But that hasn't really stopped him from playing like a professional poker player for the better part of the last dozen years or so. Frank's day job is managing several successful businesses throughout the United States, but when he sits down at the table, he more than holds his own, having racked up more than $3 million in live tournament earnings, and by being a regular in the super high-stakes mixed games that you see in Vegas or LA. We got into a little bit of everything in this one, covering Frank's time in the military, his success in business and poker, and we even talked politics. Did you know that Frank ran for Congress a few years ago? Anyway, here it is, my conversation with Frank Kassela. Frank, how are you?
I'm terrific. How are you?
Good. Have you recovered from the grind that is the summer?
I've recovered from the grind just fine, but I'm still getting over the combination WSOP funk food poisoning thing I ran into right before the main event.
Was that literal food poisoning, or is this just a joke about the daily offerings at the Rio?
No, it was actual food poisoning. At least that's what the doctor in the hospital ended up telling me.
Oh man, so this was serious. How many days were you down for?
Well, I started getting the WSOP funk on July the 3rd. You know, just the congestion, bronchitis-y feeling sort of thing that just most of us deal with. Right? Yeah, we usually get that at some point during the summer, and by Thursday of last week, I had that worst case scenario where you get to play in 3 events, where I bagged on the 1,500 from the day before, and I think we had like 5 or 6 people to lose before the money. Sure enough, didn't make the money. It was like one of the guys that busted in the first 4 minutes of day 2. And so I was able to go hop into 3K, no limit, and first small blind, did a blind versus blind hand where I flopped top 2 pair against a guy that had 10 jack, I had king queen, and hit a 9 on the river. So ended up just, since I bet coming in, he 3-bet me. I wasn't really putting him on 10 jack when he made the big bet on the end. I thought maybe river to set of 9s, but it was just too hard of a spot to lay down. Wasn't really thinking he had 10 jack, but anyway, nobody wants to hear all those kind of stories. And then I actually busted so fast from both of those that I had like an hour and a half to kill before the Raz event, and ended up coming back and playing that all the way till the last level before breaking. And by the end of that day, I literally sounded, I think, like I had pneumonia or something. I was just coughing and hacking, and went home feeling pretty terrible, but was excited, thinking, okay, well, if nothing else, I'm going to get to play the 10K stud, I guess, on Friday at this point. And at 2 in the morning, I started getting a fever. And by like midday Sunday, I ended up going to the hospital because I had a fever over 103 for like 24 hours. And they did the blood test, chest x-rays, the whole 9 yards. They couldn't find anything wrong other than they assumed that I had some sort of viral infection, probably something I got food poisoning.
Do you know what you ate that was so questionable?
I thought it was one thing, but then in the end, I think it ended up being something different because it kind of hit me twice. So I think it was something that was actually in the fridge at the house.
Oh, wow.
I won't call out the restaurant.
Yeah, you don't want to
originally thought that it was, but
you're the one eating 6-month-old cheese.
Yeah, right. And but it, so the worst. I mean, I set my whole summer up focusing on No Limit. Didn't play some of the mixed game events that I would always normally play because
you're normally in the other games.
Right, yeah. Because there's so much fun to play and we don't get to play those tournaments at any other point. But I really wanted to do well in the main event this year. So to have that happen, I still ended up going in and playing day 1C. And I did make it to the last level. And oddly enough, now I think about it, same hand. King, queen of clubs, flop, top, 2 pair. And the way the hand played out, the guy that ended up busting me had 10-5 of diamonds.
Okay.
That he had 3-bet with coming in, and it went runner diamond. I mean, the way it was almost impossible to put the guy on anything that could have beat me. But
so a bittersweet ending to the summer, but you did manage to score another bracelet. I want to get to the bracelets, but I want to start back at the beginning.
Okay.
Because you've had 49 years on this earth.
Okay.
And I want to hear about the early ones.
Okay.
Germantown, Tennessee.
Okay. That's not where I live.
You were born near Chicago, though.
Yes, I was born in Chicago Heights, Illinois.
So tell me a little bit about Chicago Heights.
Okay. It's like a southeast suburb that runs right along the Indiana border. And that's where my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, and like a fleet of cousins. My dad was one of 8 kids, and they almost all stayed in that area. And we lived there until I was 12, and then we moved to Texas, and I basically finished growing up in Dallas.
I heard that you were playing card games real early on.
Well, yeah, I mean, we played, being from a Polish Catholic family, it was, kind of something we learned to play blackjack and poker when we were all really little. I remember actually one time my dad played, I don't know if it could have been a poker tournament, some sort of live poker game they did at the Knights of Columbus. And he did well enough to where him and my mom went to Las Vegas. And that was when I was like 6 or 7 years old, but I can still remember it.
It's in the blood.
Yeah, exactly. And, my parents split up when I was 8. He ended up moving to Vegas. So I spent summers and stuff out here.
Yeah.
And
early exposure.
Yeah. And even over the course of like my young years, I didn't really know anything about WSOP, but he had mentioned the name Doyle Brunson. So I actually kind of had a vague idea of what a world-famous, world-beaten poker player was.
It's interesting that you mentioned the Polish Catholic thing. My stepdad, or my ex-stepdad, I should say, or former stepdad, I don't know what the terminology is there, but he was Polish Catholic, and we played a ton of card games around the kitchen table now that I think about it. Is that a thing? Is that a stereotype I wasn't aware of?
No, well, I think, I think that, I guess, I don't know. It's just definitely something that it was common with my whole family up there.
I remember
it was
the
just
whole
card
extended
games
family would come over. Play a lot of rummy and gin and stuff.
Yeah, I think, just, being Catholic in general, we all kind of like to gamble. And, the Polish thing on top of that, I don't know if that has anything to do with it just as much as it was a big thing to do around Chicago for sure.
So you moved to Texas. Culture shock or?
Yes. As a matter of fact, when I first got down there, I bet, as a kid it seemed like it went on forever, but probably only went on for 30 days or so. But other kids would refer to me as a Yankee repeatedly. And I'm thinking, I'm from Chicago. I'm a Cub fan.
This is like 1980?
This is exactly 1980. Yes, summer of 1980. And I had no clue what the term Yankee even meant. Like the Civil War was nothing that was ever on my mind at all at the age of 12. And it took me a while before I finally figured out what they were even referring to. Luckily, I made some friends who explained it to me, and I was like,
because you look like Ty Cobb.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, right. I thought that was just so bizarre, though. But cowboy boots, cowboy hats. When we first moved down there, we lived in Houston for about a year, and Houston's where they have the big livestock show and rodeo, and I've only been back to Houston a couple times as an adult, but as a kid, I mean, it was definitely just so significantly different from Chicago.
So you were in Dallas, or near Dallas, I should say. That's where you went to school?
Yeah, North Mesquite High School is where I graduated, just east of an east suburb of Dallas.
And what was the plan at that point?
Well, at the beginning, from the beginning of high school on, my plan was to have a career in the military.
Oh,
my
okay.
actual overall life, I was one of these kind of rare dorky kids that tried to have my whole life mapped out. I was in ROTC in high school, and my plan was to do well enough in high school to get accepted at West Point. Then I wanted to, get through West Point OCS, become a commissioned officer. I wanted to serve in combat arms branch of the Army for, give or take, 4 or 5 years, then go back to school and get a law degree, and then, go work at the Pentagon or something like that in the JAG Corps. Go through a complete,
You had an ambitious plan.
Oh, I had it all laid out. Not only that, I had like a complete 20 to 25 year plan for retirement and then get out, and I was going to go into politics.
Oh, man.
And this was all my plan when I was 14 years old.
So was Dad in the armed forces, or what gave you the idea?
My dad was in the armed forces, but by that time, me and my dad had kind of, we weren't really talking a whole lot. But he was only in for a couple of years. He ended up getting... Well, lucky enough, I guess is the term, but yeah, lucky enough in the mid-'60s to get shipped to Germany during Vietnam.
Okay.
So, but I don't really know what it was specifically. It was just, as a poor kid growing up, it was kind of like a method for being able to pay for college was sort of the initial thoughts, when I first got into ROTC, and then... I was good at it. I was kind of like Forrest Gump. I was, round peg in a round hole. The military stuff just fit for me, and I ended up enlisting in the Army Reserves when I was a junior in high school. And
well, it's interesting that you're a poker player now, which has very little structure. But early on, you craved the wake-up calls and the...
Yeah, it really is. I loved everything about the military. There's... Matter of fact, I was just having this conversation with my 10-year-old son the day before yesterday. Everything about the military I enjoyed doing except the gas chamber. And unfortunately, I ended up having to do the gas chamber multiple times between ROTC summer camp and the fact that I was then also a drill sergeant while I was in the reserves, and ended up having to go through the chamber multiple times with trainees and stuff like that.
Brutal. I saw a video of my former... or ex-stepbrother's Marine. He was going through basic training for the Marines, and he had to go through the gas chamber. And he came out, and he was just like red eyes and just...
Yeah, all the snot and everything
awful.
In your
just
head.
Everything just leaking out of your face.
Oh, it's terrible.
So you had to do this multiple times?
Yeah, I actually had to do it as a participant in the whole removing your mask, doing your name, rank, and serial number thing 4 times. I did it twice in ROTC summer camp. I did it once during basic training. And then when I did what was called split training, which is where you do basic training between your junior, senior year, and then you go to what's called AIT after you graduate from high school, Advanced Individual Training, and I was in field artillery. So, coming back, unfortunately, I had it timed out just perfectly wrong to when I joined my second year battalion. They hadn't done their gas chamber yet, so they made me do it again, and it's like, oh my God, this is terrible.
Like raising your hand, I've already done this.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Luckily, they didn't make me do the 20-mile road march again, which it took me a lot of talking to get out of that deal, because that's also torture. Now that I think about it, that's the other thing that I didn't like. Those are the only 2 things about the military, though, that I didn't. Actually, the 20-mile road march ain't bad for about 5 or 6 miles. But, you're carrying like a 45-pound pack and an M16, and, 20 miles is a long time to,
Were you a good shot?
Oh yeah. I was actually commander of the rifle team when I was junior and senior in high school in ROTC, which is also kind of a weird deal because, back then I had keys to the range, I had the combinations to the safe. I would get there in the morning, I would lay out the rifles, I would lay out a box or 2, depending on how many rounds we were going to send down range every day, of 22 long rifle ammunition.
Yeah.
So we might be firing 100 rounds every morning. There were 6 of us on the team. Imagine, 6 basically unsupervised kids in a high school.
Yeah, I don't think they hand 17-year-old kids guns anymore at school.
No, not usually. No, they frown on that now.
So what happened there that got you out of the military?
My girlfriend got pregnant.
Oh, okay.
And yeah. So, life had a different roadmap. And, the thing is, by the time I had graduated, I didn't do well enough to get into West Point, but I had earned I was going to have an ROTC scholarship to Texas A&M. But their first 2 years of college, you had to be, if you were in the Corps of Cadets, you had to live on campus for the first 2 years. And my girlfriend and I are just now getting married. She's pregnant. She's like, There's no way you're going to go, live in barracks for 2 years. So we need to figure out something different. And so I just, went out and got a job. And
so what was that first job, and how did it go?
It went great, actually. I learned how to... I went to work for a company where we sold office supplies nationwide. I dealt mainly with attorneys. We did a lot of the business over the phone, and so you'd get to know your customers and call them up when they needed to restock stuff. And then when I had left that company by '93, so 6 years later, and started my first business, and I was basically doing the same thing but selling supplies to post offices nationwide.
Okay, and that's when you moved to Tennessee?
Yeah. I had a non-compete agreement where I couldn't do it in Texas or a state that bordered Texas. So
what was your connection to Germantown, Tennessee?
Actually, one of the guys I had originally gone up there with to start a business was formerly from Memphis. There were three of us, and one guy was from Oklahoma, one guy was from Memphis, and I was the person that was just from Dallas. And so he already had like connections and stuff like that. So it's where we ended up going to set that thing up.
Now, all this time that you're in college and or in the military, and then starting this business, are you playing cards at the same time, or did that kind of go away for a little while?
Yeah, the thing is, I didn't really play poker in any sort of an active way other than just, casual games and stuff like that until '93. When I moved to Memphis, Tunica had just opened its first casino, Splash Casino, which, I mean, you want to talk about a weird experience going back in time. There was this giant tent outside of it where you'd have to go wait in line, and you had to pay $20 to get into the casino. And then when you got in there would be people like 3-4 deep waiting in line to play slot machines. It was one of the craziest things I've ever seen.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And
I can't imagine a demand like that in Tunica ever.
It was. And, well, you got to remember, this
now
is
they pay you $20 to come in the door.
There was nothing in Biloxi. There was nothing in Shreveport. There was nothing in Oklahoma. I mean, there wasn't anything even around Chicago at this point. I mean, these were literally the only casinos in the country between Atlantic City and Vegas.
Yeah, Florida didn't have anything.
No, Florida had nothing. And so anyway, when obviously the casinos, as it got bigger down in Tunica, was just the thing that you'd go do on a social basis. And so when we'd go down there with groups of folks, I would always gravitate toward the poker room. They'd go play craps or slots or whatever they would go do. And I would just, grab a beer and sit at the poker table. And back then we would play 1 to 5 7-card stud was usually the game that I would play. And so I did a lot of that from '93 until 2000. And then when I was getting divorced in 2000, we were splitting the kids every other week. And so every other week I had nothing to do in the evenings. And for whatever reason, one night I just, by myself, thought I'm just going to go play poker.
Yeah.
And that's where I finally got really bitten by the bug.
This was pre-Moneymaker. And then I heard that you actually went to the World Series in 2000, but you didn't know what you were doing.
I had no clue. The main event 2000 was the very first poker tournament I ever played in.
The $10,000 event?
The main event. Yeah, the $10,000 buy-in. Well, what happened is I had started playing in Tunica, like end of '99, beginning of 2000, and I was mainly playing like 20-40 limit hold'em and was crushing the game.
So you're playing big.
Yeah,
big-ish.
Big-ish for there. Yeah, I mean the two biggest games we had down in Tunica was 20-40 limit hold'em and 2-5-10 or 5-10 1/4 PLO. And then stud was still pretty big back then. And every now and again, we oddly enough out of nowhere we'd play 300, 600, ace to 5 triple draw. So I know, right? What a weird game that was. 300, 600 triple draw out of nowhere.
I think that might have been player dependent, right?
Yeah, there were a couple
I can think of some old timers in that time who would have been wanting to play ace to 5 for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah, there were like some old Mississippi cotton farmers that loved those low ball games.
A guy named Mark, bald guy, right? I'm trying to remember his last name.
You probably even remember him better than me. I know Dougie would play, and I'm trying to remember some of the other. I mean, it was just, it was one of those things where, I mean, I really almost had no clue what was going on. But if I did well at 2040, I don't know if did you know Jack Keller at all?
I never met.
Okay.
Jack Keller.
Well, anyway, he basically lived at the Horseshoe after Jack Binion opened it until he passed away, and he would, play that 2-5-10 or 5-10 and a quarter PLO definitely every Wednesday and Saturday, and so I looked at it kind of like as tuition. If I'd go down there, do well at the 2040 game, and whatever I'd take out of that game, I'd go sit and play in the PLO game and learn from Jack Keller how to play PLO.
Yeah.
As I gave him all the money I took out of the 2040 game. Anyway, this isn't a day before casinos did poker tournaments.
Yeah.
I know that's hard for people to imagine right now, but card rooms didn't run regular poker tournaments. Matter of fact, we didn't even play No Limit Hold'em. There was, no
dailies weren't a thing, and then you had a couple series each year. There was like the World Series, and then there was like the Super Bowl of Poker for Amarillo Slim, and then maybe a couple in Atlantic City, right?
Well, Foxwoods was doing their deal, and Trump did. I think the U.S. Poker Open was what they were called, or something like that. And
US
LAPC,
Poker Championship.
Yeah, U.S. Poker Championships, and LAPC was going on at Commerce. So anyway, I was doing well, and one of my my vice president of sales had told me about the movie Rounders one day, and I had never heard of it. So he bought it for me the next day, brought it in, took it home, watched it, and the next day I came back to work, and we were talking about it, and I told him, I said, I'm going to go play in that main event of the World Series of Poker that Matt Damon was talking about. He's like, you are not. I was like, I'm serious. I've done well enough in this game. I can pay for it, so I'm going to go do it. And so we were right there in my office on speakerphone. I called the Horseshoe. And I had no idea that there were multiple tournaments. This is how clueless I was about the series at the time. So I called this lady up, and it took her a while to even figure out what I was, she's like, well, the World Series is going on right now. And I'm like, so it's already started? And she realized I was asking about the main event, which was still like a week away. And she's like, no, that one hasn't started. You can still get in. So anyway, I fly out. I'm staying at the Mirage, actually, and the day I'm going down there this is when we only had one day one, so I loaded it up and
no
went.
choice.
Yeah, it was it.
And everyone shows up on time.
And I went down there, and you couldn't just buy in with cash. You couldn't even, I don't think, use regular casino chips. You had to actually have $20,000 worth of $500 lammers. So I had to like figure, somebody had to show me where you had to go get the lammers, and I think 90% of the people back then would win their way in through super satellites or single tables and stuff. So I think they thought it was just bizarre that there's some, doofus out of nowhere with $10,000 trying to buy in. I mean, I was just the typical clueless, or stereotypical clueless person.
You were a whale.
Oh my God, it was ridiculous. And anyway, I finally got my way, bought in. I made it through the dinner break that day, which, in retrospect is unbelievable to me. Because I had no idea about bets. I had never played a hand of No Limit Hold'em until then.
And you only started with 10K in chips.
Yeah, it was chip for chip back then. Yeah. And I believe we actually started at 10-20 blinds, too. We actually had red chips on the table to start the day.
Okay.
Yeah, and so just that whole process of a tournament, color up, and all of those things were just outside of the realm of my experience at that point.
Was there a lot of like errors in like with verbal betting or actions, or did you pull a I call and I raise, or I see your? Did you ever do one of those moves?
No, I mean, luckily I had been playing enough limit hold'em and stuff, and just general, I knew what the seat numbers were and, stuff like that. So I wasn't, complete. Like the first year, I remember when the online people first showed up at the World Series, there were at least 24 people I had to explain to them what a seat number was. They'd won their qualifiers online, but for whatever reason, they had no idea what a seat number was.
They'd never seen real chips and cards before.
Yeah, yeah, they couldn't even riffle.
So was there ever a time where you were considering to do poker full time, or were the businesses doing too well at that point?
By then, the businesses were doing too well, and I had a lot of employees who dedicated a lot of their professional life to the company. So that was my primary responsibility, and still is to this day. I did hit the road a chunk like between probably 2008, 9, 10, 11, where I would play probably 4 months a year of poker. It's actually the main reason why I ended up buying a house in Vegas, because I bought my first house out here in 2002 because I had, got to the point where I realized I wanted to play more of the World Series, and I think Bellagio had just started doing a tournament series, and it was starting, so I was thinking, okay, if I'm going to be in Vegas for 2 or 3 months a year playing in tournaments, hotel's way too expensive. I may as well buy a house.
Yeah.
And the property market was just blowing up back then. So it just, made sense to buy a house instead.
So what did you move corporate headquarters over?
No, the corporate headquarters is still in Memphis, and I've got businesses in Dallas also, and have Scrubtastic here in Las Vegas. But
is it a dog washing business or?
No, it's medical uniform.
Oh, like
retail.
scrubs, like for uniforms. Okay.
Yeah. We have stores here in Texas and Tennessee, and but anyway, I just bought my first house was in Anthem here, and which is a great place to live. But if you're going to be playing poker and coming to the Strip a lot, it's kind of like torture. Eastern Avenue might be one of the worst roads in the country. And so we lived there for a few years, and then in 2007 we decided to buy a bigger house. And once we did that, we realized, wow, we just like being out here a lot more than we do being in Memphis. So I got myself squared away to the point where I could do my work for the most part from my home office.
Yeah.
So we moved.
So you don't consider yourself a pro poker player?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I've never, it's never really been a primary source of income for me, and I've never really been able to spend at the most maybe 4 months in a year playing. And that's, really, other than the series, kind of a sporadic thing. By the time 2003 rolled around and we had got our first house out here, I had gotten to the point where I'd do at least 2 or 3 weeks every year of Commerce. So I was doing that, the World Series for sure, and I think that was about the time WPT started. They were doing an event at the Mirage. They were doing
Mirage
an event at Mandalay.
Mandalay Bay, Mirage. Bellagio had, I think, 3 at their peak.
Yeah.
Each year.
Yeah. So, that was really all
Plus, there was circuit, like big 5K circuit championships not too long after.
Yep.
At like...
Flamingo had one. Caesars had one. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like they were all up and down the Strip.
Yeah, but I did, ended up over the years, I did Borgata a couple times, did Foxwoods a couple times. But, that was really about it. Other than that, it was mainly Vegas, LA stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's go to the year where everything went amazingly.
Okay,
2010, World Series of Poker Player of the Year. You win 2 bracelets and like $1.25 million. Mm-hmm. Is it life-changing at this point, or?
No, no. Luckily, I've been fortunate enough to be successful to the point where the money in poker's always been, the money's never mattered. It's always nice, winning money, but for me, especially at the World Series, it's way more about the bracelets than it is the money.
Well, as a rich businessman, do you feel that gives you an edge when the money doesn't matter as much, or?
I think it goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think at different times it gives me an edge, and at other times it, I think my bubble play in particular is kind of horrible because the money doesn't mean anything to me. It's why when you look at like my WSOP results, my final table ratio versus cashes is kind of crazy. I think I've had 10 or 11 final tables and 25 to 30 cashes, so I'm like 30 to 40% going to make a final table if I cash. That's kind of nutty.
When you get there, you get there.
Right. When I get there, I've got chips. I'm willing to just gamble on the bubble, trying to, pick up pots and, exploit some edges, take risks that other players just won't take because the bubble's too important.
What about winning Player of the Year? What did that? Because 10 years earlier, you were completely, green, had no idea what you were doing. That's quite a turnaround in a decade.
Yeah, it's an amazing accomplishment, I think. When you enjoy poker as, whether it's a hobby or a profession, I mean, what does that equate to? I mean, it's like, it's like winning, all 4 of the major tournaments in golf or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, for me to be able to do that, I was always, if you look at my results over the years, I was always very streaky. I'd go a long while without doing a whole lot, and then all of a sudden I'd have 4 or 5 cashes at one series at the World Poker Open in Tunica, or whatever would go on. I was just very streaky. And I always felt like if I could get my streak going at the right time at the series, I'd have a shot at Player of the Year, from the time they created it going forward. And there was actually one friend of mine that I said that to out loud. But, wasn't anything I necessarily talked about, at great length. And, just that year, you get that momentum early in the month of June. And you just start, when you're feeling it, when you're seeing the ball, you're putting people on hands. Your reads are always really good. You're picking up tells. Your bet sizing is perfect almost all the time. You're controlling the table. You're controlling the conversation. It's just when you're in that zone. I mean, people who get in that zone who've had that kind of success, they know. And it's just, I don't know, it's like a dream come true. It's like living in a dream for however long it goes on.
Well, it's crazy because, not only did you just come in and win Player of the Year, but you did it in the mixed games. You have a stud 8 or better bracelet. I think the other one's Raz, and then this year was low ball. So you obviously took some time during the last decade, or between then and now, to learn the mixed games. Where did that come about?
I would say, the biggest thrust of my education there came from just the live cash game we were playing in Aria when we opened Aria up originally. Like JRB and I, for example, would start that game every day at noon. We usually played 2-400. Every now and again it was 3-6 or 4-8, but we would start that game every day at noon and we'd play till 9 p.m. And I think originally we were playing maybe 8 games, the standard horse run, and we'd throw, a couple triple draws in there and stuff like that. It was kind of still very vanilla poker compared to what we play in the mixed games now. But we had some good live players in that game that, just were willing to contribute a ton of money.
Yeah.
So it was just a good opportunity to, to pick up, extra cash. And so it was important to learn all of the different games and get really good at them.
Did you kind of trial by fire, learn as you went, or were you like a voracious reader?
No, I've never really been a voracious reader. I have felt like, and the advice that I give anybody when they're starting to play poker is there's no experience like experience. When it comes to getting better at the game, you need to get in the trenches. That's why I've told a lot of people, if you want to get better at something like Raz or Triple Draw or those kind of things, but you don't want to go sit down and play the 20-40 or 40-80 mixed game at Bellagio or whatever, because that can be really expensive. When the World Series comes up, play the $1,500 dealer choice or play the $1,500 Raz or play. It really economic-wise is a much better way to get better at those games than almost anything else you can do.
I read that you're the reason why Johnny Chan has a 10th bracelet.
Oh yeah, that was brutal because in 2005 is when that happened. We'd been playing that final table all day long, and I was the chip leader, and I basically felt like I'd been setting Johnny Chan up to overplay a hand all day long.
Okay.
It's just a question of when was I going to get him to do it. And, had a situation where I had pocket aces. I 3-bet him coming in. He repotted it with pocket queens. It was pot limit hold'em. And, I was able to shove at that point. He snap called me. And, it was very weird to be in that spot for me too, because you got to realize, they were taping a final table right over here. Phil Locke was one of the 4 people with me and Johnny. It was me, Johnny, Phil, and one other person. I don't remember him. Jennifer Tilley was final tabling the ladies event behind us.
Yeah, she just went.
So the room is packed full of people, and everybody, for the most part, is watching our table more than anything else. They're not paying attention to the TV or the ladies event because Johnny's going to be the first person to win 10.
Yeah.
So everybody in the room's rooting for him. So when the hands get rolled over, people are like, "Oh man, that's horrible shit." Oh, can I cuss? I don't know what the rules are.
Say whatever the fuck you want.
Excellent. And so, he mumbles something like, "Come on, lucky ladies," one time, and man, that flop comes out Queen, King, King, and the room erupts cheering for Johnny.
That's gotta be such a bad feeling to be the only unhappy person in the room.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was just, it was terrible. And, the hand ran out. I didn't catch a king or an ace to save the hand, and he ended up doubling up. And at the time, he and I had probably 80% plus of the chips in play. So whoever won that hand, it was, just a question of leaning on the other two guys until they were done. I don't remember. I think it was actually Phil that busted me a couple hands later. I didn't, like I said, me and Johnny almost had exactly the same chips. And so he goes on and wins his 10th bracelet instead of me winning my first.
Well, you've had 3 cents.
Yeah, that's true, but, having 4 would be better. Not to mention the fact, I wouldn't have seemed so much like an out-of-nowhere lightning struck this doofus, in the ass
you mean
in 2010.
In 2010.
I would have already had one under my belt. And
I don't know. The poker media can be cruel. I think we might have started that one off it's been 5 whole years since he's done anything.
Yeah, since his farm guy from Memphis. Yeah, I can see that.
Oh, damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're obviously successful at business. I'm wondering if you treat poker like a business, or is it just like, my extra money goes to poker?
No, I mean, I track my play. I do all my tax stuff correctly, and so I track all my stuff, very meticulously as far as that goes. I even went through some periods of, like journaling hands and stuff like that at the end of the day. I never really got into reading a whole lot, but just, putting my thoughts onto paper. Sometimes I would do goal setting where I'd write out my goals for the year for poker. So definitely took it seriously as far as that goes, just never been in a spot where I was financially dependent on the results.
I'm just curious what you think about actual poker pros, people who depend on just poker for a living, and some of the mistakes you see day in and day out, as far as money management or people overexerting themselves or stuff like that.
Well, the biggest advice I would give somebody who's grinding their way up in the world of poker, the 2 biggest things is, I think, obviously bankroll management and game selection. And I think game selection is a bigger issue. I think I see pro players very often putting themselves into games that it's just not an edge.
Yeah.
That's not a game you should put yourself in. Especially at a place like Las Vegas. There's 200 tables in town. You can find a better game. You might not want to be playing over at the Orleans because the Bellagio is more comfortable, but at the end of the day, if that's what you're doing to make money, you find the best games to put yourself in and go there.
But not you, though.
Well, I mean,
because you also like the trial by fire,
That's true. I mean, on a personal level, I'm lucky enough to be able to afford it to where it doesn't matter. But then on top of that, there are a lot of things about my game that is unconventional. I think it's one of the reasons why I'm successful, and it's also one of the things that leaves some people scratching their head.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, I can be in those games. I've got the skill, I've got the knowledge, I've got the the depth, the dimension to be able to play those games successfully. So for me personally, I should be able to sit. I mean, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I'm playing against the 5 best no limit players, at 200, 400 no limit. Mm-hmm. But in just about any other situation, I'm comfortable sitting there and feel like I've got an edge on the game.
You mentioned the head scratching plays. Is that because you play like a counterintuitive strategy, or not a counterintuitive strategy, a strategy based on just doing the opposite of what everyone else does?
Basically, yeah. I mean, to a degree, I do my very best to be unpredictable, and I don't know that I necessarily. I say a lot of goofy things at the table sometimes that I think come across as seeming to sound dumb. I don't necessarily do it on purpose. It's just kind of my conversation style, but it ends up working well for me in the long run.
Are you hyper aware of your own image?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I'm hyper aware of it, but I'm definitely aware of my image in other people's eyes. And
Well, how do you think you were seen by like people in the poker world, or just the average kid who doesn't know who you are at the table?
Oh, that in that sense, I don't know that I know. But I mean, I'm talking more about stuff like I know I'm known to make or to attempt to make a lot of hero calls that other people won't. I'll play a lot of stranger hands out of position maybe than some people will. And nowadays, in particular, I'm willing to make pots bigger than a lot of the small ball strategy people do. I don't see a ton of benefit, especially in tournament play, in being, in a rhythm of doing the same thing everybody else is doing. I mean, I understand the logic behind some of that, but at the end of the day, I think, being different at the poker table and having a different approach, taking different lines at hands and pots, is in the long run going to bear out more success.
I'm trying to remember who said the quote, but somebody said something along the lines of, if you keep using the same line every time, it eventually becomes a rut.
Right, exactly. And that's the thing. I do think that there are very good world-class players who do play very predictably, especially in tournament situations at the World Series, for example. But on a cash game basis, they're just going to crush the cash games in the long run because that's what they're used to doing.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I saw on Twitter you said it was nice to see so many old people win bracelets this year.
Wasn't it?
It was nice. There were some of the classics.
Yeah, and
I got some hardware this year. But do you think that's a problem or
no?
I mean like that the game has passed some of the old timers by, and that it's becoming a younger and younger man's game?
No, I think that's I think almost the exact opposite of that. I do think that they're from the time of Moneymaker, when you start in when was that, 2003 when Moneymaker won? When you start there, and you've got this rising crop of 17 and 18-year-olds who watch that on TV.
Yeah.
These are people who would have been our nuclear physicists and, our mathematicians that normally would have hit the world, in 2007, 2008 with their brilliance in a different way. Instead ended up focusing their attention on poker. And when that wave of young people, and the same list of people we're both thinking of. I mean, when you think of that wave of players that came in, they did exactly what I'm talking about. They hit the game from all different angles with different lines and different betting strategies, and they were all friends and they talked to each other for hours and hours and hours. And by the time when they first hit like a tidal wave, the established group of players, I think it took a few years for a lot of people to react to that.
Yeah.
And I just think that this year was a year, more so than any year I can recall, where it really seemed to like, the skill level that's required to win bracelets, the results seem to bear out the fact that skill is a necessary element. Better than any year I can recall.
Well, you're 49. You're getting close to being in the seniors event.
Woo! Right?
Do you feel like you're playing the best game of your career?
Yeah. Overall, I'm definitely playing No Limit better right now than I've ever played it, and I'm definitely more aware of gaps in my game now. I think it comes from not just more experience at cards, but I think a lot of it also has to do with maturity.
Okay.
As you get older, you get wiser. You're more willing to be self-critical. So I see,
humble.
Yeah, I see holes in my game, and I'm willing to, discuss them with friends of mine and work at getting better. I'm willing to seek out knowledge from other players and, recognize and admit the fact that these people are better at these games than me. So all of that stuff working together just kind of, I think, helps you be a better player altogether.
Well, you obviously don't play full-time, but how often do you get out to the big cash games in town?
Not real often. I mean, like right now I'm getting ready to leave, hit the road in the next few days, and I just end up, having to go back and forth between Memphis and Dallas and here, especially right after the World Series. It's hard for me to put everything else on hold for 6 weeks so that I
now you got to put all the fires out.
Yeah, exactly. So now I got to go behind and put all the fires out.
But when you're in town and it's the regular year, you're not traveling the circuit, are you a cash game guy most of the time?
I might, over the course of a year, have 25 to 40 cash sessions, maybe.
That's a lot.
40 would be a lot. Yeah, 40 would be a lot. I'd say I probably have 24 minimum.
Yeah.
I probably play a couple times a month.
And how do you think that those games have changed? Because obviously you play high stakes, whether it's Ivy's room or Bobby's room or whatever. How has the game changed over the years, in your opinion?
Well, when we were first getting Ivy Room going in Aria, the people, those of us who were playing every day, I think had a huge edge, especially when we started introducing games like Badesi Badusi. There were people that, especially, great No Limit Hold'em players that would come in the room.
Yeah.
And, we would just shear them like sheep and send them back. And, it was, almost, you kind of felt bad for some of them. But they wanted to get, and I'm talking about some, very recognizable names, that came in there and, gave it a shot. They'd put, 20 to 50K in action, try and, we would gladly take it off their hands. But those people have put the time in the games over the years and gotten a lot better at all that stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not that easy anymore. When you sit in a game at Bellagio, especially like the one game that we'll play that's almost always going to go is like 8160. Well, you go play that 8160 mixed game right now, that's a hard table.
Yeah.
It's way harder than beating the 3600 at Aria was.
There's like one spot, if that.
Exactly. That's the thing. And when that one spot shows up, the list is 20 deep, to get in the game. And then, other days it'll just grind along, with the same.
Well, that's the criticism I hear today of the big game or the big games that are running is that it's just, the same 20 people passing money around, and it's just whoever's running the hottest lately. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Does poker have a problem attracting the big time whales these days? You think?
I do think the mixed games, especially the big mixed games, was having a real hard time attracting new money for a while, but I think that mixed games in general are becoming more popular, and I recognize now there are. Wealthy people or whatever you want to call it, whales who initially start playing like 100, 200 no limit, that's the game they'll show up to play, who recognize, they play a few hands of triple draw or no limit deuce or, whatever, and they start going, man, these games are a lot more fun than just sitting here grinding Hold'em. I think it usually starts with PLO. You get them to play like a PLO no limit mix.
That's dipping your toe in the water.
Right. You get them to dip their toe in the water and they're like, okay, well, this is just as gambly. There's not a lot of huge disparity between any hands if I get all in pre. So I'm just, that's a good gambly game. I can play that one. And then we get them into that. And then usually the next step is one of the triple draws, usually deuce to 7. We'll get them to, to play that. And then, you kind of introduce them to Omaha 8 or better and then PLO 8.
Yeah.
And, stud games sometimes might be a bridge too far, but, eventually...
that's interesting. Triple draw before stud.
Usually, it just seems like the progression that I've been a part of, in bringing some new deep pocket players into the game over the years. But, just a lot, I don't know, for whatever reason, stud variants to a lot of people is just like old man games, so... It's just, I don't know. But, once they learn them, they like it. Stud's is great, I think. Personally, I'd rather play almost any variant of stud over just about anything because it's just, you got to keep up with so much more information and, your reads are so much more important and the ability to bluff in the hands takes it's 4 dimensions instead of 3. You got to set bluffs up, on 3rd Street and 4th Street to be able to bluff effectively on, 5th and 6th Street and stuff like that. And
I think it's also good just for social reasons.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, people have to pay attention so their face isn't in their phone.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't even think about
that. You mentioned your political aspirations when you were 14. And then you ran for Congress here in Nevada in 2013 for a short while. What caused that decision? Why did it not work out? Do you have future plans to pursue politics?
The Republican Party's shutdown of Congress in 2013, I thought, was phenomenally irresponsible. I mean, it rippled through the nation's economy across the board. I mean, it hit big business, it hit small business, it hit, individuals waiting for, Social Security checks, whatever. For people to think that it's appropriate to stand for office, get elected, and go to Washington, D.C. and shut government down, for them to think that that's some sort of responsible way of participating in the process of democracy, I think is crazy. And, so I immediately drew a hard line in the sand. There's no way I was going to, up to that point, I would support candidates of both parties. Mm-hmm. And, I always felt like I was one of those people that was just going to vote for the person that was best. But, taking that one step further today and seeing who the Republicans have put in the White House, from my point of view, is just like their willingness to be irresponsible with the levers of government seems to have no.
Well, does that disgust trigger a wanting to do more in politics or to do less? Because right now, my idea is to put my head in the sand and wait until I can breathe again.
Sorry, I still got the real fun. It wasn't even so much a desire to run for the sake of running as much as I felt like, especially being the father of 5 with 2 granddaughters, it was responsibility to get involved in the process. Mm-hmm. Normal Americans, people who aren't making their living out of politics and, not using that career path to grab a hold of power. People like me need to step forward and run for office and do our best to change the system. And I think right now more than any time, it's important, especially, forget about whether or not you like what's going on with individuals inside of politics today. As a collective body, the government of the United States, when you look at the stuff that Edward Snowden revealed, going forward to today, our government in a lot of ways is just out of control.
Yeah.
And things have got to change, and more Americans who recognize the changes. It's like when, I don't mean to get off on too much of a political.
I like it. This is.
Oh, okay, good, because you
got people loving and hating you right now, so it's perfect.
Well, here's the thing, it's like when you look at certain things, I understand conservative, leaning on, as far as, less government, less taxation, I want to keep the money I earn. I understand all of that kind of stuff. But when you imagine what our society is going to look like in 20 or 50 years, we're not going to live in a world, 20 years from now, just labor itself is not going to be the same thing it is today. Labor is going to be almost free because of automation. And I don't think people a lot of times want to recognize how earth-shaking that's going to be to our society economically. And when you recognize that reality is coming, whether you want it to or not, there are changes that we need to make. There are responsibilities that need to fall onto the shoulders of the federal government, because it's the only thing big enough to really be able to handle. It'd be great if private industry could handle all of those changes, but there are too many societal changes coming, and we need to work together collectively as a society. And then when you throw the whole, the climate change and what we've done to the planet as a species, on top of these incoming economic changes, I don't know. It's just, to me, there's an overwhelming amount of stuff.
It's overwhelming, for sure. I'm terrified of all of it.
Yeah.
Especially job loss. I mean, you can see it in retail right now, and then obviously with energy, you have all these people still trying to back coal until the bitter end. It's very frustrating. If I granted you the presidency right now, what would poker look like in America?
Well, I'm very libertarian when it comes to stuff like that. So, and I felt like the opportunity that we lost when, some of the politicians, were able to kind of, work to push online poker out was just stupid, because I felt like Las Vegas could be the Silicon Valley of online gaming. There were thousands of jobs that could have come to the Valley. If we would have legalized it, regulated it, especially with Harry Reid in the Senate Majority Leader position that he had and the ear of Barack Obama, instead of Black Friday, had they legalized it and said, we're going to coordinate all the online gaming regulation, programming, oversight, and everything through Nevada Gaming, through Las Vegas, because that's where all the experience is.
It would have made sense. You know, the Nevada Gaming Control Board is already basically copied by every other state in the nation.
Right. I mean, it's just when you think of us, the fact that we had one of our 2 U.S. senators had that much power and influence with the sitting president at the time, it's ludicrous that we lost that opportunity, I think. And that's, you know, so for one thing, that we would not only would if I was in a position to have that kind of power, not only would we have legal online poker, but the government would actually work hand in hand with that industry to promote it globally, so that American online poker would be the safe, trusted online resource. You don't have to worry about collusion. You don't have to worry about super users. You know, this stuff is going to be fair. It's going to be administered correctly. And we would encourage players from all over the planet to do it.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
real missed opportunity.
It's common sense, right? But it's still an opportunity right now. But we just don't have the correct political will.
That's true. Okay, I'm going to lighten the mood a little bit.
Okay. Sorry.
No, that was, you know, my depression. Let's do rapid fire questions. These are fun. Can you talk about the worst bad beat you ever put on anybody?
Oh, wow. The worst bad beat. I've put so many on so many people. I wouldn't even know where to begin.
So nothing truly horrifying because it doesn't spring to mind.
It's hard for me to remember exactly how the hands played out. I know I laid a real sick bad beat on Barry Greenstein in the 25K 6 max in 2010 when I ended up in third. He had pocket aces, and honestly, I don't even remember what I had. I just remember a brutal suck out there and crippling him, and ended up having enough wind in my sails to go onto the final table. And cash game, you know, there's just so many hands. It's just, I can't even off the top of my head think of it.
What about the biggest pot you've ever won or lost? Your choice.
Biggest pot I've ever lost was that hand I referenced earlier.
Let's do it. Let's tell the story.
I really, like I said, JRB needs to be the one to tell you this story. He remembers the details better than I do. But
Rick Solomon, huh? Because
Yeah,
he told me about a hand he played with Rick Solomon too.
Did he? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Well, anyway, at this particular game, I believe we were playing either 1 200 no limit or 2 400. And I had sat in the game with 50 and had run it up to about 160 and change. So I had a really good session. And I was, I'm always, JRB will tell you, I'm kind of known for, once I've done my winning, I'm going to kind of lock it up. I don't really go off for any big numbers. I just like to get in there. If it's a good situation, make my money,
book a
my
win.
stuff up, and go home. Anyway, I'd already gotten all my chips kind of ready to go, and Rick was in the game. He knew I was getting ready to leave, and he wanted me to straddle my last hand. And I said, no, I'm not going to straddle my last hand. And he said, well, then I'm going to go ahead and straddle for you. And he throws like $2,000 in front of me. So he's blind straddling for me. And then he blind re-raises it to 10. So we've got 2 blinds and then 2K in front of me and 10K in front of him, blind.
No one's looked at their cards yet.
The cards hadn't even dealt yet. So I'm like, oh shit. All right. So the hands, they all get dealt out and it folds around to me, because nobody's, just going to enter that kind of hand light. And I look down, I got ace king. And knowing Rick like I do, I just take my tray of chips and I just slide it into the pot and say all in. Because
take his 12K and punish him for being an idiot.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking. He snap calls me with pocket aces. And,
oh my God.
Sends me home. Like I said, JRB tells the story way better than I do.
Oh my God.
Because it's, And so that was the biggest pot I ever lost and probably the worst bad beat up. It wasn't even a bad beat. Obviously, I was behind the whole way, but just a bizarre cold deck. And like
made more bizarre by the circumstances.
That's the thing.
Man.
Like JRB says, had we been in a big Hollywood home game or something like that and it happened, you'd be like, oh my God, that deck was set. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That was able to happen. It was literally my last hand. And but anyway, I mean, it was, at Aria, so obviously everything was on the up and up, and I would never insinuate that Rick would do anything like that anyway,
not.
So
it would take a lot of talent to do before the cards came out.
Yeah, I mean, it was goofy. I mean, the whole thing was just one of the craziest things. And anyway, that's how that one goes.
Yeah, $320K pot.
More than that, yeah. 3, as it was closer, probably 3, almost 350.
Brutal. All right. What about you like to do side bets, prop bets? Have you ever been one of those types?
Not tons, no, not really. Before I ended up losing the weight that I did lose a year before last, I was looking for somebody to do a weight loss prop bet with me, but and me and Ben Lamb talked about one a few times, but we were never able to actually, get one on because I felt like I needed some odds because he's younger than me and he was a little heavier than me. I thought but we never did kind of agree on a number, but that would have been.
Well, you're looking good. How much have you lost?
I'm 57 pounds off of my high
off your
now.
peak?
Or off of what I weighed in at before I started.
You look like you're ready to go run a marathon.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm in really, other than the illness I've been dealing with, I'm in the best health I've probably been in since I was in my 20s.
Even the best get sidelined every once in a while.
Yeah.
I know you don't travel the circuit much. What's your favorite tournament destination? Or poker destination, let's just call it that.
Nowadays, I would say outside of Las Vegas, I'm assuming is what you're asking, I think is the Seminole Hard Rock in Fort Lauderdale.
It's my hometown.
Huh?
That's where I'm from.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's a well-run casino. The tournament's well-run. The food is good. The people, people are always in a good mood, having a good... It's South Florida. I mean, it's just, I love going down there. I'm planning on being down there in a few weeks, mid-August, and can't wait to get down there. It's just fun.
You obviously have played in the big game with some of the best... And right now we have Doyle, who still manages to get it done at an old age. Who's your generation's Doyle going to be? Can it be you?
It could be me. It depends on... I think that...
Who do you just see playing the longest and still keeping up,
I will definitely be playing a lot of poker when I'm Doyle's age.
Yeah?
I don't... There's not any reason I could think of why I wouldn't. My game... continues to get better year after year, and as I start to relieve myself of corporate responsibilities, it's what I enjoy doing. I play poker first and foremost because I love to play poker.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's social. It's a good time to me, and I just don't foresee there ever being a time where I won't enjoy it.
That's awesome. The best poker player that we've never heard of, in your opinion?
That we've never heard of.
Not never, but you know what I mean. Just doesn't get their due. Somebody maybe that you've seen that impresses you, that maybe isn't very poker famous.
Wow. The thing is, I could have come up with a few names, like 5 or 6 years ago, but those people have now since gone on to that kind of fame. And, I think of somebody like John Monet, for example, when we were first starting that game at Aria, 8 years ago, he was in the game on a regular basis, and nobody knew who he was really back then, and he was awesome. And
John Monetti, Monette,
John Monet.
I always mess it up.
Angry John, John Bonetti's an angry old guy from Houston that passed away a few years back. He was a character, that John Bonetti, but that's a whole different story.
Bonetti, yeah.
Yeah. That's a whole different player. But I'm talking about good old Angry John. He's a good friend of mine. Enjoy playing with him, and like I said, he's super good. Like I said, Marco, Crazy Marco. He, not a whole lot of people knew him 7 or 8 years ago.
Well, he just went on a bracelet tear himself.
Yeah, that's the thing. They're those folks are all known now. I'm trying to think. There's just nobody I can think of that people don't know.
Do you listen to headphones at the table?
I used to, but now I intentionally do not anymore.
Okay, but when you did, when you're at home, What are you listening to?
Lately, if I am listening to music, it's the soundtrack from the Broadway musical Hamilton.
Oh, really? You're obsessed like the rest of America?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I went and saw the show pre-opening on Broadway, and ended up being fortunate enough to see the original cast 6 times. I've seen it twice. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm a big Hamilton fan.
What other shows, or is it just? In particular, you're a big Alexander Hamilton fan.
No, I mean, my daughter's going to be 21 shortly. Her and I started a minimum 1-a-year annual trip to New York when she was probably 8 years old. And, we just love Broadway shows. Yeah. I've seen 100 of them over the years.
All right. Hamilton's obviously one of the best, but
yeah.
What else do you like?
Well, before Hamilton, I would say my favorite was Les Mis. And then, from an overall entertainment standpoint, Book of Mormon is almost impossible to beat. One of Lin-Manuel, who's the producer of Hamilton, one of the shows that he did prior to that he really didn't get tons of recognition.
The Ghetto?
No, not In the Heights. That was his first big one. But between those two, he did the Broadway production of Bring It On, the cheerleader.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that was a Broadway show.
Yeah, and it was brilliant. He did that same hip hop style songwriting for the music, and
that's cool.
The dance numbers that they do on stage. I mean, the cheerleading routines are amazing.
And then Spider-Man.
I never watched. Yeah, I never did see Spider-Man. But I mean, I've seen Cats, I've seen Miss Saigon, I've seen American in Paris. I mean, you go through the years. I mean, I saw the Mousetrap in London. Used to go to London frequently with my kids. And actually went, a couple years in a row for WSOP Europe, and there was an EPT event that ran at the Hilton Metropole, kind of in conjunction.
Metropole next to Leicester Square.
Yeah. And so we that was all good fun. We'd watch all the shows over there. So I got to see Wicked in New York and in London, and I got to see some of the other ones that we've seen. Mamma Mia in both cities, and Les Mis in both cities. And, that's how much of a junkie I am on that stuff. I've seen a lot of those shows many times.
We end the podcast the same way every time, with a question from the random question generator. And your question is, what is your ideal way to celebrate your birthday?
Just spending the evening with my kids.
Well, first of all, let's see. You're a February birthday, okay? So it's cold at that time of the year.
Yeah, oddly enough, the reality, of the answer to that question is usually, especially over the last 12 or 13 years, I'm grinding an event at LAPC.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, same time.
Yeah, usually that's the end of the month, so we're doing stuff like the mixed game, or one of the just one of the fun events to play at LAPC.
Yeah.
So usually that's where I am, but it's not where I
understand that problem. My birthday is mid-July, so
exactly
every year it's like I got to cover the main event on my birthday, but
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's like the ideal way to spend my birthday is just spending time with my kids. The reality is usually I'm upstairs at the Commerce grinding some tournament.
Well, Frank, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Hope you get to spend a ton of time with your kids. Relax, get over this bug.
Well, thanks for having me on. I enjoy it. Anytime you want me to come on and chat about something, I'm here.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
All right.
After listening back to that interview, I've now realized that I meant to say Mickey Mantle, not Ty Cobb. Ty Cobb played for the Tigers, obviously, not the Yankees. Anyway, thanks again to Frank. Be sure to follow him on Twitter @FCasella. If you haven't already done so, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you leave a review on iTunes, let us know by sending us an email to pokerstories@cardplayer.com, and we'll hook you up with a free 6-month digital subscription to the magazine. Thanks for listening. Attention American poker players. Do you want to legally cash out your poker winnings to PayPal? Then head to globalpoker.com and see why it's the fastest growing site for US players. That's globalpoker.com.